Yep. Good evening, everyone. Right. So, last session we discussed about how to handle forms and their validation using React Way. Using React Way, you saw a lot of lengthy concept. That means configuring the form, accessing data from the form, storing the data coming from form elements in a state, and posting the data. All this requires a lot of things. So you have seen we have to write so many things. Uh, we need to design a form and we need to configure on key up, on change, and we need to write for every element handle change because we cannot access the data of any element without using that handle change. Why? Why we cannot access the data without writing handle change? What is the reason? Without writing handle change, why we cannot access the data? Because React supports only one-way binding. That point we discussed already. So React supports one-way binding. It will not support two-way binding. If two-way binding is supported, whatever data you entered, it is updated into the source. If not supported, you have to manually do that by using handle change. So this point we already learned. So when we learned about data binding concept. So yesterday, when we designed form, we were trying to access data from the form. We are trying to validate the form. It requires a lot of functions. But now we can make it little easy by using and implementing third parties, right? We will see one third party today, means how we can implement third party forms. So we will see how to use a formic library. We will see a formic library. Formic is a third party library, and this library provides some good techniques and built-in functions. Those allow the React developers to design forms in a simple way. To design the forms and to manage the forms, Formic provides a simple library. So Formic, it is a third-party library used in React applications to configure a form and its validations. To configure a form and its validations. So it is a third-party library. By using this library, you can handle a lot of configurations. So that is what the Formic library. So generally, what is the advantage of library? You know that. So library provides predefined properties and functions. So which you can implement and customize according to requirement. That is the advantage of the library. it provides some predefined properties and functions. So actually, it will simplify React forms because the actual way of dealing with form is lengthy and it is not great when you are dealing with complex forms. Then better and good option is to understand about the predefined libraries and use them so that we can simplify the approach. So how the Formic works? First, you have to install Formic for project. So npm install Formic and save. You have to install Formic just like how you installed Axios and others. So you install Formic and save. Now, after you install Formic, now how to use Formic? What is the basic syntax? Means how we can use it. So first thing we will see how to configuring a form using Formic. How to configure a form using Formic. How we can configure the form using Formic. For that, we have to import use Formic hook. We have to import this hook from a Formic library. So you need to import. So use Formic. So from Formic library. First, you need to import that library. So use Formic is a hook which will provide all the properties and methods that are required for designing a form. For designing a form, whatever methods and properties are required, it will provide. Just like the other hooks you use. So Formic provides that. Now what you need to do is create a Formic reference. Create a Formic reference with the configuration. You have to create a Formic reference with configuration. How to create a Formic reference is constant Formic is equal to use Formic. And this use Formic comprises of an object. This object will provide lot of attributes. Use Formic is an object. This object has some important properties like initial values. Initial values is nothing but it is an object type. What is this initial values? It is an object type. What is that initial values? I will explain. I will tell you. That means Formic contains some properties. So what are those properties? One is initial values. Another one, it is having so validate. Validate is a function type. We have validation schema. Validation schema. Validation schema is also a function. It is a function type. Actually, validation schema is a function that returns object. function that returns an object. We call it as schema object. We have another one is on submit. On submit. On submit is a function that is also a function type. We have like on blur. On blur is also a function type. These are the important options that are required for configuring a form. So initial values, validation schema, and on submit, on blur. These are the important things. So when you are dealing with the constants here, when you are dealing with the formic, we have to configure this. First thing is, what are initial values? Initial values are nothing but the values that you want to deal in a form. In a form, what are the values you want to deal with? Right? So what are the values to deal with in a form? What are the values you want to deal with in a form? That means what are the form elements you are having, like username, password, age, date of birth, all these. That means initial values refers to the values that you are going to deal inside the form. That means it refers to the values coming from form elements. So what is initial values? First thing, initial values, actually initial values refer to form elements and their values. Refers to form elements and their values. So what are the form elements you want to deal inside this form? And what are the values that you want to set inside them by default values that you have to define? So here we have initial values are those. Second thing is validate is nothing but validate. It uses a function. It uses a function that returns error object. Returns error object. It uses a function that returns error object. And important. So here error object means which contains the error report of all elements in form, which contains error report of all elements in form. That's what actually validate is. So validate means it contains error report. Error report means which element failed, what failed. All that error report is present in this validate. Validate comprises of error report. That means it uses a function that returns error. But one of the problem is here, validate is not a schema. It is not a schema means it is not a structured, predefined validation. These are all our own validations only. That means we use our own validation. Same like yesterday, we return if name is empty, if name length is this, if name is not matching with this. Like that, we have to write our own functions. So validate is used when you are writing your own functions and you are verifying them. That is validate. What is validation schema means? So validation schema, actually, it can use a predefined validation service that comprises of predefined validation functions. Ready-made functions will be there. So you are not writing validation manually. You are trying to use validations which are already predefined. Ready-made validations are written. If you are not writing validations manually, you are using the existing validations libraries. Actually, there are so many extra validation libraries which you can use in React. In React, we can write our own validations, or we can use again a third-party validation. For validations, again third parties are there. For forms, we have third parties. For validation also, we have third parties. By using those validations, we can just use ready-made validation. Ready-made validation means if you need required, just you can use the word required. If you want to verify minimum length, maximum length, then we have to just use min max like that. So it will provide ready-made validation schemas. We will see both. How to write our own validation, how to use ready-made schemas, we will see that. Next one we are having. So we are having, what is it? On submit. On submit. So on submit is nothing but, so it defines the functionality. It defines the functionality when form is submitted. It defines the functionality when form is submitted. One specialty is actually it receives, it gets a form body. It gets a form body. It gets a form body object. Do you know what is a form body object? In HTML, data when you submit, it is submitted on GET request and POST request. When you submit data on GET request, the data will be in query string. We can see the data in query string. When you submit on POST request, the data will be in form body. Data when submitted on POST, it usually kept in form body. And data when it is submitted in GET, it will be in query string. That is general nature of form. Form body contains information about the elements and their values. That means what values user is submitting, from which element he is submitting, all that information can be accessed by using that form body object. So form body object is nothing but it comprises of form elements and their values. That's what actually on submit contains. We have on submit. Similarly, on blur is nothing but, on blur. That means it defines actions to perform when element loses focus, when element lost focus, right? Similarly, we can use on change also. On change, we know what is that. So it defines actions to perform when element value changes. So these are general things: on submit, on blur, and on change. So generally, when you are defining the form, this is how you configure the form. Now, one of the major specialty here is everything is inbuilt written for you. That means, suppose I want to collect value from a text box or a drop down or a checkbox or a radio. You don't need to write on change event for every element. In yesterday's approach, what we done, for every element, we have to write handle change. We have to collect value using event argument and store in a state. Then we have to submit that on submit click. But now Formic internally have this on change already written. You just attach it. That means how to attach. We have to just define here. We have a text box. Input type is equal to text. And here we have to write on change is equal to, we have to use formic dot handle change. That's it. Formic dot handle change. That means you don't need to write any handle change function. Already it is present in Formic. Do you know what it will do? It will collect the value that you entered inside this text box. And important, after collecting the value entered in text box, this value, it will send to initial values. It will send to initial values. Initial values means it will store there. So whatever initial values are there, it will bind them here. Whatever changes are happening, it will update here. In the initial values, it will update. So you don't need to write any function. You just attach a function. That function internally identifies the changes in that value and it will update. But the question is, so how this text box responds to a certain field? How it will respond to username or age, like that? For that, for when you are using Formic, it's very important that every element must have a name. This name should match with the name that you have defined in initial values. That means actually we have Formic initial values. Initial values is an object. It is an object. Actually, in initial values object, we have username field with some value. Now what will happen is this username of initial value is binded with this name, right? That means it is mandatory that every element inside the form must have a name, and that name should match with the initial values. It should match with initial values. Then Formic can bind the values. It can access the value and it can store the value. That means this is a basic thing. I hope you learned in HTML that HTML forms cannot submit the value of any element if there is no name defined. I hope you learned in HTML that rule, right? When you design a form in HTML, it is mandatory that the form element must have a name. Otherwise, form cannot submit its value. You know the basic rule. HTML forms cannot submit the values of elements if they don't have a name. it's very important that every form element must be defined with a name. Mandatory. That is basic rule of HTML. So this basic rule you already know, right? That means, so you are designing some form. Suppose there is some form, and in the form we have some details like username, and we have a text box. Input type is equal to text, and we have age, and input type is equal to text, and this is having name called age, and we have a button called submit. Now usually there are two elements in HTML form, but only one element is having name. That means username, this element is not having name, only age is having name, and you entered username and you entered age and you submit, only age is submitted. That is very basic rule. In HTML, everybody knows this point, that every form element must have a name. That's a basic thing. And formic like libraries use this rule. So they will attach the initial values with the names. If name is not there, the value is not submitted. That is mandate. So you have to make sure that every element is having a reference name. And this name should match with the initial values keys. Whatever the keys you have mentioned, they should match with the keys, right? Now, automatically two-way binding will work. Everything it will manage, right? Just what we have to do is we have to use this one. And let's see how to work with this now. We will create a form now. First, we need to install the formic library. So let me install the formic library. npm install formic and save. I am downloading and installing the formic library. And keep in touch with these libraries regularly, because these libraries may be changing in every new versions. Because these are third parties, they are uncertain in behavior. That means after few days, they may remove some options. They may add some options. You have to get detailed information from the official source. Official source you will get from npm. Already I showed you npmjs.com. You can get it from there. Okay, formic is there. Let's create one component. I will create a component here, and by name formic demo. Okay, let's add a formic demo.jsx. So here I'm adding a simple export function formic demo, and return just a simple container. So container fluid, and here we will design register user. Let's create a simple form. We have a form. First, we will just configure the form. Data list, data term. This is username, and data definition. Input type is text. And another data term is age. Data definition, some input type is text. And another data term, some mobile, and data definition. So input type is equal to text, and some city, and data definition We have a drop down select, and we have an option. So choose city, and we have city. Okay. That is the detail we are having, and we will put a button. This is a submit button. Register, and let's add class btn primary something. Now we will keep this in the startup. Formic demo is the startup. Now it is a simple form we are having. Okay, same appearance, same thing, just what we designed yesterday, right? Now on the register click, we need to collect the data from the form and we need to display, send to some server. Yesterday you saw what to do. For every element, you have to write on change. And for every element on change, collect the value, store in a state, and submit that on submit click, register click. That's the lengthy process. Now see what we can do. We will import here. We will import. So we will import use formic. From formic library, we will import use formic. After that, we will create a reference for formic. Constant formic is equal to use formic. Use formic is expecting some properties. It's an object which is expecting some properties. What are those? Initial values. Initial values. What are the initial values? It's an object. It is expecting what are the values you want to deal inside your form. What are the elements you are dealing inside the form? First element, username, and what is its data type? String. And second is age. Its data type is number. And what is the next one? So this is mobile. Mobile is a string. Next one is city. City is a string. That's it. Now, these are the fields which should match with the control names. That means the initial values that you have used, these are nothing but element names. That means with that name, it should find elements. So then what is the name of this text box? Name of the text box is user name. What is the name of this text box? Age. What is the name of this text box? Mobile. What is the name of this one? This is what? City. It should match. Next point is whenever user makes any change, it should update back into this location. This username, it should update back into this location. Then we have to just use on change. On change. Formic have a ready-made function called handle change. Just use handle change. That's it. Internally, it will maintain a function called handle change, which will collect the latest value entered inside this text box, and it will update that into this initial values. That is good. That means now you don't need to do anything. Just use the same for everyone. Handle change, and handle change. Same. That means formic have an handle change. Internally, it will maintain a separate handle change for every element. You just write for the elements handle change. So in yesterday's example, on change of username, you have to write handle user change. On change of age, you have to write handle age change. And to collect the new value, you have to use event arguments. You need a state to store the values. But now automatically a state is maintained, and the state, all the details are stored in this initial values. Now what we have to do is collect these values on submit. Just very simple. We have to use another on submit. On submit, it uses a function which collects all the values. You see, on submit function is collecting all values. Values coming from where? Username, age, mobile, string, everything. It is collecting everything from those values. That means now just you have to collect the values. That means here values. So values contains all the values. So this is a function. That means on submit, it will collect all the values. And where to submit this? We will use alert json.stringify whatever values are posted. That's it. Actually, later what we will do, we will post into the database, right? Now here, observe, when should on submit fire up? When form is submitted. So we have to bind this to form on submit. Form on submit, what should happen? Formic should handle submit. It should handle submit. That's it. That means form will handle submit using formic. Now, what will happen on submit? It will send all the values of elements here. That's it. This is a simple approach of a form. In yesterday's example, you saw we declared a state. In the state, we store all user details. And we have to write on change for every element. And we have to collect the new value. But now you see, I'm entering the username. I'm entering the age. I'm entering the mobile. I'm selecting a city and click on register. Everything is submitted. That's very simple. Whatever data is there, it is submitting. Converting the data into JSON, we are using everything in a JSON form. Later, when we submit to server side, we will handle server side interactions. I will show you. Means how to send this into database. For that, we need backend APIs, backend server side technologies you have to learn. We will see one example, we will see that. But this looks very simple. That means we can make the forms in a very simple way just by using a formic library. Now, any complex form you can design in a simple way. Any complex form you can create in a simple way. Just what you can do, you can configure formic with initial values. And on submit, we have to collect the values and send wherever you want. Right? Whatever you want to do with those values, you can configure. This is a simple form that we created by using formic. And important, how the new values are updated by using formic handle change. How the form values are submitted by using formic handle submit. By using formic handle submit, it will do those actions. So the same thing when we done yesterday, what is it? Form demo, na? Yesterday's form was register, right? So not register, React form demo. Yeah. In this, you see yesterday how much logic we have to write. That means we need to declare the state. We need to write handle change for everyone. We have to write handle submit. Validations, okay, validations we will see now. Here how we do validation. But this is all what we have to do to collect the data from every element. Right? Now, this is very much simplified now. This is very much simplified. So you cannot say that always everybody have to use only this, because some people are not satisfied even with this way. They want more shorter technique. We have more shortcut techniques. I will show you level by level. We will see. That means level by level, we will see different techniques. Finally, you will get an idea that there are so many techniques for situation. According to requirement, we can choose any. So this is one technique. Here, more shortcut is there. More advanced forms are present. But these are enough at certain levels. That's the reason developers are satisfied with them. If they are not satisfied with these things, they have more other third parties they can implement because they are famous in some other activities. But general form, this is enough, right? We can create a simple form and we can submit. Okay. Now this is example for, this is an example for a simple formic form. This is a simple formic form that submits data. Okay, this is formic demo.jsx. And this is the formic. Okay, let's see how we can add validations here. How we can handle validations in this formic. So while working with formic, validations, again, so many types are there. I told you, one is validation, another one validation schema. Validation means, will you write your own functions or will you use ready-made validation services which are already present? But you have to download the extra services if you want. First, we will see how we can write validation functions and how we can manage them. Let's see how we can write the validation functions, how Formic will manage. See, for that, I want to validate these fields. So username is required. Username minimum, it should have 4 characters. Age must be number. Mobile should match with certain pattern. City must be selected with some value. Otherwise, it should not allow, like that. So here option have value like -1. We have an option value like, so Delhi. So we have option value like Hyderabad, like this. What we want to do is we want to set the validation. For that, what we have to do first, we need to write a function. So validation in Formic can be done in 2 ways. By using your own validation functions or by using third-party validation plugins. Currently, first we will see how to use our own validation functions. For that, we will write a function. So validate user details. This is the function. What this function have to do? This function should return an error report error report about all fields errors. That means, so into that we will pass all the fields. We will pass all the fields. Fields means username, mobile, age, city, all the fields we will pass. That means we will say that is form body. Okay. Form body contains the field names and their values. Field name is, this is a formal parameter. You can give any name, X, Y, Z, A, B, C, anything. Traditionally, I am giving form body because form body indicates that it contains a field name and a value. Form body contains the field name and value. And now what should this function do? It should return an error report. Error report should contain all the information about errors in all fields. That means we will create a var errors. Errors is an object, and this function have to return that errors object. That means every validation function should return an error object. That error object contains errors information about every field. Every field error is kept in this object. That means username error, age error, mobile error, everything is present inside this error object. And this error report returned by this function will be used by Formic. That means Formic will use a option called validate. What is validate? Validate is expecting, you see, it is expecting validation report coming from all this. It is expecting an object. It is an expecting an object. That means that object is returned by this function. What validate user details is returning? It is returning an object. It is returning an object. So this validate username, validate user details function is used by this validate. So Formic related entire error report is present here. Now what we have to do is, so that means in this user details function we have to write the validation now. How to write the validation? One by one, every field validation we will write. First condition is what? If form body have a field called user name. If this field is equal to empty, then what should happen? If it is equal to empty, then what should happen? Errors object will have a user name. In that we will display a message. In that we will display a message. Into that we will display a message. What is the message? Username. Username is what? Required. That is what we are defining. Username required. We are just defining that username required. That's it. That means now errors contains username field which returns this error. Similarly, we will write here else. So we have, that means another condition. What is that condition? Form body dot username dot length is less than 4. Then we will put another message. What is it? Errors dot username is equal to, so name to short, minimum 4 characters. That's the message we want to display. This is the error messages we want to display. That is what we are defining. And very important here, we can add another condition, else. That means it is greater than, then errors dot username, it should be empty. We will keep an empty message. If it is matching, then it will be empty. This is for only username. Now we have to write, remember, this errors is returning username currently. Username related error is returned here. Same, you have to now write errors for others. What is it? Another condition. If form body. So for example, we will say form body dot required, you can give anyone. I will use directly is nan who form body dot age. That means if it is not a number, then errors dot age, it should display age must be a number. That is the message we want to show. Otherwise, else errors dot age is equal to empty. Nothing is displayed. Similarly, now we will write for if mobile. Mobile means if form body dot mobile dot match. Match is a string function. Matching with regular expression. You know how to write regular expression is written in double slash. Regular expressions are written in double slash plus 91 slash d and 10 digits number. If it is matching with 10 digits number, then errors dot mobile, it should display so that so it should display empty. Otherwise, it should display errors dot mobile. It should display invalid mobile like this. That means we are verifying and we are validating the mobile. Okay, now what about city? If form body dot city is equal to -1. If it is -1 means they haven't selected a city. Then errors dot city, in that we should display please choose a city. This message should come. Otherwise, so errors dot city should display empty. That is the message. Now you see, now this errors object is having all the errors. Username error, age error, mobile error, city error. All the errors are kept in this error object. And this error object is returned by which function? Validate user details. It is returning those errors. Am I right? It is returning the errors about username and all. That means now formic validate is using the errors coming from this location. It is using the errors coming from this location. Now where you want to display? Remember, it will validate those errors. So automatically. And where to display the error message? Error message must be displayed here below. I will put a class name as text danger. And here we will display the error message. How? So here, suppose you see formic have dot errors. In that errors object, you have all these errors ready. Which error? User name. That means formic inbuilt have an errors object now, which is going to get all these errors and display. And similarly, the same thing we will keep for the age, this errors dot what age. And for mobile, errors dot what mobile. And here we are having city. Here errors dot what city. All these are defined now. Now here we are writing a separate validation function. That validation function is returning all the errors. Now you see when I try to submit here the data, then it should show that errors. So we haven't entered any details now, right? For every field, you can give required pattern, everything. I written only one validation for them. Now here I am entering the username. Then it says name too short. Yesterday for that, what we have done, we have used on key up. We have to use on key up, on blur. Now not required, right? You just type here. So then automatically it will validate. You entered some string, age must be number. I'm entering something, it's fine. Now you entered some 987654321 like this. It is invalid. It should start with what? It should start with +91. Now it is fine. You are selecting one city, that's okay. You are not choosing a city, please choose a city. And you select the city and register, it should submit. For that, we haven't written any logic. Again, we need to write for submit, that we will see anyhow. Here, just we are using the concept of what? Valid. How we can validate and how we can manage the data, right? So validation can be defined. Validation can be configured in this way. So this also looks lengthy. That means many developers are not satisfied with this also. They will say that I have to write validation for everything using logics and all. No need. You have ready-made functions for the validation also. So if you can download such libraries, then you can do validation in a more faster way. And actually, many interviews, they ask this in a different way. They ask like, do you know asynchronous validations? Asynchronous validations means actually all the formic validations that we are using, they are inbuilt asynchronous. They are inbuilt asynchronous. If you have observed these validations, these are all asynchronous validations only. If you have observed, this is using a function. And when you look at the formic library here on submit, you can see this is using on submit, collecting the values, validate user. And you can see this is validate. It is a promise type. Promise type means you know that all promises in JavaScript are asynchronous. Promises are by default asynchronous. So errors that you are using are all asynchronous type. Asynchronous type. What is the advantage of asynchronous? They are more faster. They will not block, and without blocking, they can validate. Usually, sometimes people ask like that, like just to confuse you. Do you know any asynchronous validation? Simple point. If you are using any third-party validation like Formic, it is inbuilt asynchronous. If you are writing your own functions like yesterday without Formic, then those are synchronous. They are not asynchronous. Can you write our own asynchronous also? Yes. Instead of writing ordinary function, write a promise by yourself and you can write. Right? You can create your own promises and you can write. Right? But for asynchronous validations, we have ready-made validations. We can just implement them. So this is the example of validation, means how the validation works here. So one extra thing you have to learn. What is it? This is formic validation functions. Formic validation function is nothing but formic provides validate promise, which uses async techniques to validate the values of form elements, values of form elements. So you have to create a function that that takes form elements, comma, validates their values, and returns error object that contains validation messages. That contains validation messages. You have to create a function that takes form elements, validates their values, and returns error object that contains validation messages. So usually we have to write. So we have a function, validate user. We have to collect form body, and it returns an errors object. Here you write the logic for validating form elements, write the logic for validating form elements and return errors. Now what we have to do is configure validation function. Configure the validation function. How to configure validation function is use formic. In actually use formic, we have initial values. It is an object. After that, we have validate. Validate is actually validate user. That's what we need to define. Next step, display error message. Display errors is simply in a div. You can get formic dot errors dot the field name which contains the errors. You can define. It is going to get the errors configured inside that particular field. So first we need to create a function, then attach that function to formic. Then we can access the errors and display those errors. These are the basic steps we need to follow. So that is how we validate. Here, example, I will give the same formic demo.jsx. Formic demo.jsx, and let me copy this code here. This is the code with all the validation part. The code with validation. So this is also not much satisfying to developers in different situations because they want more simplified technique. So if they want more simplified technique, then we can go for some more libraries which can simplify the validation. Usually, so formic people who use formic, they popularly use another library called yup. Formic people use another library called yup. Actually, so it is a library that provides validation schemas, validation services, actually provide validation services. Generally, what is validation service? Validation service is a predefined functions library. Validation service is a predefined functions library that provides validation schemas for various validations. Validation service is a predefined functions library that provides validation schemas for various validations. Validation schemas means predefined structures, ready-made validation structures. It's a very popular validation library. You can use yup. Actually, how you verified whether value present or not? You have verified by writing a function. If the body dot name is equal to empty. But now these libraries will use ready-made functions like dot required. That's it. It will verify whether it is a string or number just by using dot number. It will verify dot string. It will verify simply like min max. That means ready-made functions. How we verified whether the name length is minimum 4 or not by using dot length greater than less than, but ready-made functions. So we have ready-made functions we can verify. Actually, these libraries, they have the options like pattern. That means we can verify the patterns. We can use pattern, or we can use like test, or we can use like match, like functions. Because different libraries have different ways of verifying expression. And these people also very recently changed their functions and libraries. They are adding new functions and libraries. You need to keep in touch with them. Otherwise, you cannot blindly implement what you learned today in class after 1 month. Why? Because library will change. They will add some more new functions. They may remove the previous functions. There may be some bug fixes. So you need to keep in touch with those libraries before you use them. Before you implement them, first explore them, then use them. So because you are learning as per current version available up to today, but in future they will change. Then you can't implement the same mechanism after few days, right? That's the reason you need to keep in touch. But how this yup library works? So what is the concept behind this yup library? Let's see. Now, what we will do here is, when we are dealing with yup, actually, this is the validation function we are writing. Separate function with all the validations. So let's clean up this. I am deleting this validation function. I am removing this validation function definition, completely removed. That means now we don't have any validation related things. Let's keep everything empty. So validation part I am removing. Rest of things are present as it is, because yup is for validations. It is for validations. So I removed the complete validation functions, which I written manually, right? Now let's install another library, npm install yup and save. We are installing another library called yup, downloading this yup library. So in this yup library, what we will do is actually yup have a lot of validation services. So many will be there. What generally developers do is sometimes they import only what they need for that form. That will save the space, that will improve the performance. Why? Because if you install all and you are using only one or two, that will be legacy type. I told you that React uses a modular library. We have two types of library usages, legacy and modular. What is difference is legacy means you are importing all, but you are using only few. Modular means you are importing only what you need for that situation. That will improve the performance, right? So what we have to do is, suppose we want to use the yup library. So we have to import asterisk as yup from which location? From yup library we have to define from yup. That means it is going to, this yup is going to access all of them. Asterisk indicates get all the services that yup is having. Otherwise, you can import one by one like this. How you can import? You can import required from yup. You can import min from yup like that. If there are many, you have to put a curly brace block and define. But this indicates you are importing all. And you can access them with reference of yup. With reference of yup, you can access. Okay. Now, see here. Let's go. And here we are writing validation schema. When we write validation schema, usually we write validation schema when the validations are taken from ready-made functions. If validations are taken from ready-made functions, we use validation schema. You are writing your own functions, then validation schema. It takes the validation from you, whom it will take from yup. Yup have an object. This yup object contains, it contains an object schema, which is an object. This object contains the field names. That means what are the field names and what are the validations you want to give for those field names. Here you have to tell what is the first field name. First field name is what? Username. Okay. For username, what is the validation you want to set? For username, so we will use yup dot. It is a string type. Username should be a string type. Okay, good. Is there anything else? So username is required. Very good. Is there any message you want to show if it is not required? If it is not satisfied? Yes. What is that message? Right. Message is that name required. That's it. Is there any another validation you want to give? I want to give like min. That means min how many characters? So that means min how many characters? Some 4. Is there any message for that? Yes, put a message. What is the message? So name to short like this. So these are the validation schemas, how you can write. And what is another one? Age. What is the age? Yup. So what is the data type? Data type is number. What else? It is also required. That's good. What about next one? Next one is mobile. So mobile, we have to use yup. And yup, what type it is? String type. Is anything else? So we need a pattern. I think this pattern is not there. So it has matches with regular expression. What is the regular expression? We have slash plus 91 slash D. How many? 10. That's what we have. Any message you want to show? So the message you want to display, that means the message is like invalid mobile, like this, the message we want to show. All these are validation schema. But you may ask, like, if so many such easy things are there, why you are telling us lengthy things first? Why can't you tell directly this one? It's very simple. You can save our time. But the problem here is, even you have so many third-party libraries, certain validations they can't handle. Then you have to manually write. Now, how you will verify whether they selected an option in dropdown or not? How you will verify whether they selected a checkbox or radio or not? There is no schema for that. Then what you do? If there is no schema for any validation that you want, then for that you have to write manually. That means we should use both validation schema as well as validation. If you are satisfied with the schemas and the elements that need for them, that's enough. You can use them. Otherwise, you need to implement this. Now, this is the validation schema, and you can see that schema contains all the validation errors. This makes the validation little more simplified. Right now, what is advantage? You don't need to write a separate function. We can simply use it. Now, how to display these errors? For example, this time it is by using yup. Now here we are writing, what is it? Formic dot what? Errors. Errors dot which error? Username error we are giving. Username error is the error we are defining. And you see here inside the form now, this is the form. I click on register, it's working. And I am typing here name to short, and that's fine. That looks good. But this time very much lengthy logic is reduced. The same thing you have to write for everybody. I hope you know this now. That means what we need to do. So here we have to define what is it? Formic dot errors dot what? Age. And here same, what is it? Formic dot errors dot what? Mobile. For everyone we can add what is there. That means this mobile is a string, it should match, and it can be even required. And we can write like mobile required. All these messages you can add. Right? That means you can add multiple functions. Right? Now here mobile. So this is enough. Now you can see here, I refresh and I click on this, it should get that information. You entered something, age must be number. You entered some number, it is fine. Mobile required 9, invalid mobile 98765432110. What is the valid one? Plus 91. Name is required, some name is too short, that's fine. That is the way how we submit, and it is submitting the data. This is validation schema, and very important, if username is required and I click on register, it is not submitting. That's very good. Yesterday we written a logic for that. Right? Yesterday we written a logic on submit. If there are no errors, then submit, otherwise don't. But now it is simply not submitting the value if there is error. That means now your form is free of errors, right? Then only it will submit the form. Of course, for city, we are not writing any logic because there is no schema for that. There is no schema because required is not a schema used for text drop downs, radios, list boxes. You have to manually write. Not only that, so many things you don't have schema. For example, you see some websites ask for captcha. When they ask for captcha, they ask enter a code. That code will be changing every time. Is there any schema for that? No. Based on that particular code, we have to verify. Some websites you see like IRCTC, all these people, IRCTC and others, they will give some mathematical solution like 10 plus 20, how much, just to verify that you are not a robot. And in that situation, schemas will not work. We have to manually write. There are no ready-made schemas for them. So you need combination of both. Combination of those. So yep, validation is okay. Now here one more point is that suppose we are not typing here. Suppose you see, refresh this. I clicked inside. Without typing anything, I click outside. Now it is not verifying. I should verify that also. Currently, it is verifying only on submit. But when user clicks inside and doesn't enter anything and click outside, I should show some validation. Actually, what is that status is called as blur. That means it went focus and they blur. Blur means came out. Then what we do is here currently username is using only on change. You can also use like on blur. On blur. On blur, we have to use formic. Formic have handle blur also. We cannot use key up, key down like that because formic should have them. If formic is having them, we can implement. But formic is having blur and it is having change. That means now what happens here? You click inside that text box and click outside, then it will verify. It is verifying everyone because you haven't written for others. You have to write for others also. That means blur. That means it is verifying that and it is showing. That means you just go into that focus and click outside, then it should display. For that, we haven't written blur for this. We have written blur for this one. So that depends. You can use blur, you can use on change. These are general things. So what is the advantage of this formic? Now formic have a library called yup. By using this, you can handle the validation. We have more shorter technique. We have more shorter technique. Actually, this looks okay, good. We have more shorter technique. More shorter technique means this is good, but developers are not satisfied with this lengthy design. Now developers want that, can we make this even shorter? Of course, you can make it even shorter. How you can make the design very shorter? Actually, formic have ready-made components. What you can do is, you can just write field. You can just write field and this field should match with username. And you can just write error. This should match with username. Just write like this. That's enough. You don't need to write. You don't need to write on change, on blur. You don't need to write anything. Just mention a field and an error. It will take care of others. This is more better. These are called formic components. Formic have separate components. By using those components, we can design validation in a more simple way. But what is problem in this? The problem in this, a component means ready-made design. And if you don't like that, you want to add some more events, then this is not great. That means you want key up, key down, key press. You want like focus. Then they are not providing such events. Then we have to write manually with our own text boxes. We have more shorter technique. And that shorter technique is you can handle the forms and their validation by using another. This example also I will give you same. This is formic. So demo.jsx. This is example with the yup validation. Yup validation. But here one extra thing you have to download na. That means npm install yup front and save. Then you will get that. Now you can import the yup library and you can use that. This is example for yup library. This is another concept of validation. We will use more shorter technique. We will see, is there any more easy and shortest way of designing a form and validating form? For that, we have to use one more libraries. Then we can do it more simple way. That we'll see tomorrow, right? So first you need to try this. Then in tomorrow's session, we will finish the concept of form. And remember, we are currently learning forms just with front-end design. We will link with the backend in the next level. That means we will create a registration login forms which can work with the data in the backend. We will see with backend APIs how to work with them. First, we have to understand how to design the form, how to validate the forms. For that, we will finish the validations, how to use them in the next level. Then we will try to use these forms with real-time data. How we can use with data, registration, logins, how they can be created. That we'll see in next session. Tomorrow we'll do that, okay?